first institution to develop in any culture is theater. Before there was Greek philosophy, there was Greek drama. But before there was the written play scripts of Aeschylus and Sophocles and Aristophanes, etc., there was the theater of Thespis, after whom all actors are called thespians. And the work of theater, as initiated by Thespis for Western culture, all of Western culture, he played an extremely important role. He tends to be forgotten in the history of culture. But he, I would say, is the vanishing mediator who has brought about the entire evolution of the culture of the West. There is an equivalent in the East and in every tribal culture. What is theater? What did Thespis accomplish? The word theater is cognate with the word theory. Theory, which contains theo, God, is the capacity of vision. The theorist has a vision of the structure of reality. The theorist makes the invisible visible. And the theater enacts the invisibility and makes it visible for those who cannot yet themselves see. It brings theory to the non-theorist. It opens the third eye of those who are still blind. This is the purpose of catharsis in theater. Purification. What is purification is simply the awakening to realize that which has been unrealized, unrecognized. And through the audience's identification with the characters, struggle to awaken, to see. There is an opening of vision in the audience and a metamorphosis. And so ironically, the Greek theater often ended with the blinding of the actor. The blinding of Oedipus is the end of the trilogy, Oedipus Rex. But that blinding is the closing of the two eyes so that the third eye can open completely without illusion. It is the paradox that is recognized in all theater, that loss is gain, that crucifixion is bliss, that death is life, and that the false is the true. You see, theater is fiction. Novels are another form of theater that you can carry in your back pocket and put on at any moment. And that became now in the form of DVDs and other forms of canned culture. Theater that you can play wherever you happen to be with your little instrument. And you can tune in whatever drama shows you that which you have not yet been able to recognize. Or, if you wish, to use it to avoid opening the third eye. That's the difference between good theater and bad theater. But theater is fiction. Fiction is false. And yet it is through the false that more truth appears than through the real. We can only access the real through the false. Now in yoga there are two trinities, Satchidananda and Satyam Shivam Sundaram. Why did they need two trinities? Christians only use one. What's the need for two? There's another one, the Brahma, Vishnu, Shankar, but that's Hinduism. That has nothing to do with yoga. Although some yogis later put on a play and it became called Hinduism. And the script of that play we call the Vedas. It was later revised and they called that the Vedanta. And the script has been revised ever since, but always made worse rather than better, which is the problem with religion, because all religion is theater. Now in commercial theater, you put on a play as long as there's an audience. And when the audience runs out, then the play closes and they try putting on something else. But in the churches, they keep the same play running even though nobody's going to watch it. Mm-hmm. All the religion is a theory about the reality of the culture put into theoretical form. But when that theory becomes outmoded, obsolete, inadequate, then a new theater, which brings a new vision of truth, based on a new theory of reality that sees the invisible and makes it visible, produces a new culture. We are in desperate need of a new theater. And Ashram is a theater company. And we are as off Broadway as you can get. But to get back to these two trinities, one is based on Sat and the other is based on Satyam. Sat is the real, Satyam is truth. What's the difference? The difference is all important. You see, the ego is a false self. But what do we mean when we say it's a false self? It's not pejorative. What it means is that it is an artificial construct, a creation. It is a role. It is literally a character in a play that is called culture. The problem is when those characters that we play are no longer ordered and they become character disorders. And then the play becomes a very bad one, a destructive one. Because it is no longer revealing the invisible real, but it is now usurping the real and refusing to recognize the false as false. And rather than become a revelation, which is the function of an actor in a healthy culture, in good theater, it becomes an imitation. The problem of culture is when imitation replaces becoming. The great insight of Konstantin Stanislavski, who invented what is now called method acting, is that he said that the actor must attain the role through becoming it from the inside out. Whereas most bad actors today simply try to do it from the outside in. And so they imitate what they think the role requires, rather than becoming the invisible truth that can then be made visible. It is still false. It is still an act. But now, it is falseness that reveals more truth than the real can reveal. Only the false can become true. The real cannot. The real is neither true nor false. And it is when the character that you are playing in this theater is has dedicated itself to the making visible of the invisible real in an entirely artificial sense. But an artificial sense that has become so realistic that the gap between the truth that is falseness and the real that is absolutely invisible and inexistent reaches a point of asymptotic closeness, that these two polarities create a space that lights up, because the gap can now be crossed as it is in a spark plug in which the real enters into the false and makes it true. And that we call beauty. Beauty is the gap between the false true and the real that is beyond truth and falseness. And the visibility of the invisible that shines. Beauty is schöne in German, the shining of the aura of the real, the formless within the form that makes the formless visible. And the theory becomes the theater. And this is how Satyam, through the meeting of Shivam, becomes Sundaram. The problem with our culture today is it does not offer any roles that lead to the real. It offers only imitations of imitations. This is the mark of an exhausted culture. It has lost touch with the real. The invisibility of the real is not the same invisibility as what Scott and Durga tend to call the invisible structures of a community. Those are far too visible. We need to go to a level of invisibility that has nothing to do with the chain of command and the protocols and policies and different functionalities of performances in the culture, but the power and the intelligence that enables such a structure to be created and sustained. in a beautiful, healthy way that is free of the usurpation by imitation, by artificial ingredients and genetic modifications of the real self, but that enables the false again to become real, for culture to fulfill its destiny of merging again with nature at the level of the supernatural, not as it does today at the level of the subnatural. You see, we have to ask, what space is it in which your anxiety appears? What space is it in which you feel depression? What space is it in which you feel anguish? That is the space in which theater is born. It's not a physical space. It's not even a mental space. It's a space out of which the mental arises as an effort to understand one's anguish. And that need to understand one's anguish is what brings about the development of your character. This is the origin of theater. It is the expressing of the truth within the anguish, within the abandonment depression, within the death drive, within the nameless dread of the consciousness's realization that it does not know who it is, why it's here, what is its meaning, what is its purpose, what will fulfill its need to know that it has succeeded in achieving the fullness of its potential, so that one can die at peace. And one must be able to die at peace in every moment. The death of the ego is not a real death, it's a theatrical death. But that theatrical death must be undergone with the beauty of the greatest performance imaginable. And all the great actors want to play the character of someone who dies on stage. It's the ultimate part. Whether it's Hamlet or it's in some opera where you can sing your own death, but it is always that moment of the apotheosis of the character, in which in death it becomes one with its real self, that is the death of death, and the conquest of death by love. And this is itself the rebirth of culture, and that cathartic moment of the making visible of that in us which is deathless. And this cannot be shown through imitation, but only by becoming that. And this is why theater is a rite of passage, an ordeal, in which theater and life are recognized as one and the same. A drama is a dream. We are in this drama now. We are acting. In India, they say that when a saint or a sage or an avatar appears, he conducts a charitra, a performance. He or she makes visible the invisible God self so that others may know, may feel, may surrender, and ultimately they will imitate. But in the imitation, the power of the real is again lost, and only its echoes remain until a new performance arises in which the becoming reaches the supreme real that neither is nor is not, but is expressed only when that ultimate paradox of life and death are exquisitely present in every moment. And there is a transfusion between self and other in the same way that there is between life and death. And this is the meaning and function of that great achievement in biology called the capillary. And a culture must become a kind of capillarism. When it falls from capillarism to capitalism, that is the hardening of its barteries, in which there is no longer an exchange of truth between one member of the culture and another, but only an imitation, a counterfeit, a false communion. And the power of the Shakti of the real is no longer able to pass from one to another, and relationships become dead. And love is replaced by sadism. And so the play becomes real by becoming true play, true falseness, that enjoys its falseness consciously and allows itself to become spontaneously all the potentiality within it to express that which cannot be seen, through the joy of the articulation and the refinement and the self-disciplining. That is the paring down of all that is excess. To prepare, as an actor must, is to begin the paring process, the paring down and the removal of all that burdens the self with fear, that acts as a veil to prevent the play from fully emerging in all of its creative intelligence, which is the source and the spark of all great theater. It is this willingness to play without fear. Not to imitate, not to follow rules, but to express the freedom that is love in every moment of relationship, and to enjoy the performance of the other, who has become the manifestation of that luminosity which is the space in which the real meets the false and makes it true. This is our conspiracy to enact the presence of God with the greatest bliss that any actor can conjure up. we play our deaths and our rebirths wholeheartedly, with the beauty of surrender to the supreme playwright who is enacting us all.